I am Roberto Zangrandi, the Secretary General of the association representing the largest and, let's say, most influential distribution system operators in Europe. I would like to welcome today all of our speakers, panelists, and participants to a webinar that we gave the title of Is Open Source the Next Big Thing in Electricity Distribution? With a big question mark at the end of it. We are organizing this webinar out of an idea that we had with the Rhineland-Westphalen Technische Hochschule, so the Aachen University in Germany. And we have asked a trusted friend of the electric system, Professor Antonello Monti, to be with us today and have the word and the opening of this seminar. We know that open source has been transforming many business sectors, and the percentage of open source software behind our daily system is growing at an unimaginable scale and pace. Today, we shall raise some critical questions, trying to provide a vision of the possible implication of open source in the future work of distribution grid operators. This is a progress that we are living, and a progress that will definitely set the new framework for business models and for business practice. But first, let me draw your attention on some of the usual housekeeping rules we have become accustomed to with the webinars that we have organized in the past months. And as a participant, you will be invited to raise your questions via the Q&A tool. We will pick up a few questions, possibly as many as possible, at the end of each intervention upon the time availability. We shall try to reassemble questions that are similar or the same, obviously. Please indicate your name and that of your company or institution in order not to be identified, but as a gesture of courtesy towards the speakers and the moderators. So that's all, basically. I hope you will be connected throughout the day. The agenda you have seen. And so without further ado, for the welcome address, I would like to give the floor to Antonello Monti, professor at the Rwth Aachen University. Antonello, I think that you are very well known. Your over 400 publications have probably filled the life and the nights of many students and the weekend of some of our colleagues on the screen. You have the floor.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you very much for organizing this event and to inviting me to open. Yeah, I'll start this discussion giving a little bit of reasoning about what we mean, first of all, about open source and what we think open source is not. And then I will have some reference to some ongoing activities in this area. So next slide, please. First thing is, speaking of open source, there are some comments I don't share. So I would like to start with the negative. So the idea that open source is a low quality software developed by university as an experiment, that is software that is not secure, that cannot work in the energy sector. And also that means open source means no professional support. If you can click, my point here is all those statements are statements I don't agree with, and vice versa, thanks to the experience I built in the last few years working actively in the application of open source. I like to look at open source with a different perspective, as in my next slide, some of the statements that vice versa, I agree with. So it's a software developed by a community. So what is very important that what we are talking about here is not the initiative of a single entity, but is the result of a cooperation of a community working with governance. So this is really relevant because that's the reason why we can talk about high quality and secure software, because it's a result of safe process of following the highest industrial standards. And I will give you a reference to how that may happen. Second, also, I will say is not an alternative, but is a coexistence with proprietary solution. And that's actually a way to build a fast path to interoperability, because the openness of the open source allows everybody to agree on interfaces. And I think this is a very relevant part in the process of digitalization. I also think that from the point of view of the distribution system operator, it's a new way of thinking that put them more at the central and keep their development under control and to be their real actor of their process of digitalization. And I'll have a good example of that towards the end. And at the end, last but not least, I think all in all, they also represent for everybody, because of the shared development, a significant cost reduction. I'm going to the next slide. What is important is to understand that this model, as Roberto said, has been emerging and is really becoming dominant. And the percentage of open source code that you have in everyday life, in software that you use, but you don't see that is open source, is growing, coming to reach like 70 to 80% in many applications. This is information not well known. But even behind what we are running right now, very likely there is a good part of software that is actually open source. How is this process possible? It's possible with governance. So coming to the next slide, very important is to create a community. In our field, the emerging successful community is the LF Energy, the Linux Foundation Energy, started by RTE and Alliander, but growing in membership rapidly. Basically, the base funds of the association last year more than doubled because of the growth of participation. This slide represents not the current, because we had more partners joining the foundation in the last few weeks, so that the logo is not there. Most remarkable, a strategic member, Shell. And this is then a process that is having really a snowball effect in the last couple of years. Going to the next slide, behind those names, there are projects. And what you see here is a constellation of logos representing all the different activity in the Linux Foundation Energy that are currently basically underpinning any part of the energy value chain, and with specific, though, I would say, focus on grid operation, transmission and distribution, and actually creating synergy between transmission and distribution in a way that we didn't have before, and again, allowed and supported by the open source approach. Going to the next slide. Another important, even more recent activity is the creation of a new association. Again, I have to say thank you to RTE, because it's their idea, first of all, is to create another cooperation for the low TRL part. So the Linux Foundation is, let's say, high TRL, so close to application, but we need to feed this with new solutions. And CRESIM is a collaborative research for energy system modeling that is developing an ecosystem of research supported by industry in association. So CRESIM is an association to develop open source that will develop the new tools that are used in modeling and simulation in the energy system. There is a dramatic change in the need that companies like RT felt like really relevant, and that we have to speed up the process. And I think this is a common denominator of many elements of open source, is that because of the cooperation, openness, and sharing, we have a speed up effect in everything that we are doing. Next slide, and this you see just to give an idea on how this other association is growing. For the moment, we mostly have transmission system operator, but we are in the process of getting also distribution system operator, and of course, then we have some research institutions that are providing the backbone of the work. I'm going to the next slide. And that's my last one. I'd like to conclude with an example, also linking to some presentation later, of a very remarkable path that we had, starting with a Horizon 2020 project, Platone, which I'm still actually coordinating, is not over. We had a very relevant, interesting cooperation with Rwth in the city of Rome, understanding how their system should evolve. And the experience in Platone convinced Rwth that going for open source was the best way to go to the next generation DNS for them. They adopted an architecture that is the Sonia platform developed in the Linux Foundation Energy, and they are now going to bring this to be their cornerstone, the base of this solution. This is, to me, the most remarkable example at this point on how this process can really change the way, particularly in this case, distributed system operator may work in the future. And with that, I'm done, and sorry, one last point, a little bit of, we are launching together with the Linux Foundation a survey to assess our understanding of the preparation for those changes. So if you're interested to give your opinion, here you have the links to a survey that we prepared to assess really what is the view of industry on everything I basically said so far. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Antonello. You did not clearly answer the basic question. Yes or no? Is open source the big thing for distribution from now on?
Yes, that's my, sorry, you're right. I didn't say it explicitly, but saying that a company like Rwth completely changed their view and there's been a revolution. I thought, yeah, indirectly, you're right. I basically stated my yes, but thank you.
It was more half a joke, of course, so we are here to discuss that. And we are here also to substantiate that with an institutional angle. I would like now to invite to the floor the first keynote speaker, Rwth, who is the head of sector of IoT, European Commission. Rwth is on this position since, I believe, 5 years now, and with the Commission since some 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. So he is coming from practical experience in the domain, and he has passed through all possible application coming up to the IoT perfect knowledge of the, let's say, institutional framework that is needing, has been needing, and will need in the future. Rwth, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Roberto, for the kind introduction, and good morning, everyone, for the audience. I tried to share my screen, so the presentation should pop up in a second. Check where can control. No, I should keep. All right, now it should come. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, sorry for the delay. Yes, thank you for the invitation, and I'm very honored to be here to talk about the digitalization of energy and the use of open standards and open source, which definitely is an important area. As many of you know, we're working on a digitalization of energy action plan, where one of the key pillars is a data framework, a data exchange and governance framework. I don't go into details now because I think that will be discussed at length next week during the E.DSO, where the official communication will be also launched. But the data exchange framework and the data economy is one of the key pillars for the change for the green and the digital transition. The green and digital transition has been supported by reinforced policies, a flow of communications during the last years to reach the targets of the Green Deal by 2030. Most important is repower. We are living in a crisis at the moment, and repower pushes for more rollout of renewables and a massive scale. And that obviously creates a challenge for particularly the DSOs. DSOs have to cope with the variability of the energy, with the dynamics. They have to be more modern, and they have to be digital, and they have to be flexible. So here we have to think about the next big thing, how to accelerate the digitalization and how to accelerate all that software development to support it. The Digitalization of Energy Action Plan will invest in more smart grids. It's not only about technology, it's much more about new way of cooperation, new business models, and new ways of doing software. And it will not stay within one sector. It will go across different sectors, across renewable energy, across smart home and buildings, across EV charging. We have to find systems which connect different assets, distributed assets, maybe using Internet of Things. You might find ways, how to share data across the different systems in real time in order to keep the system stable, to react to availability of renewable energy and to change the demand side. And in particular, we're living in the times of crisis. Who has to take the burden? It's the consumer. The consumer has to react to market changes. If there's no fuel at the gas station, he will move to e-mobility. If he sees skyrocketing energy prices, he will invest in renewables. If he has to save energy in the winter, he will install smart systems at his home to reduce temperature or to manage the climate more efficiently at home. And I would not hope it will happen, but if we see blackouts in the energy system, surely we will see investment into batteries at home. So we are living in sort of a disruptive situation where everybody is agile, the system operator, the consumers. We are driven by substitution of fossil fuels. We need more grid elasticity to deal with the volatility, and we need more convenient charging of electric vehicles, and we will see much more agility in the consumer behavior. So all that requires sort of new services for the consumer, data services, and which are not only in one sector, which cut across different sectors. And looking at the data economy, we have to make sure that data is not in one silo. Data has to go across the different silos. We need sort of a harmonized data interface. That is essential. And for that, we need sort of a common conceptual model. I think I put up a reference architecture model from OneNet, one of the projects where also Untitled is involved, where you see an abstraction from the assets, and you see in the middle part these large and complex data space, the data exchange layer. So what does it mean for the data exchange layer? It's an agreement between the different stakeholders. But if you're doing open source projects across different projects, and common understanding of that reference model, about that reference layer, that's very essential in order to plug together the different projects and different components developed. So it builds on agreements between industries, but it's also, this essence of composing different data-driven services. So a reference model is a need for data exchange and essential also to align different open source projects. And we worked on the interoperable data spaces already in the past. I just want to give you a few insights, references to the Bridge Data Working Group. The association Gaia-X worked on principles for data sharing and the data space. And not quite recently, there is a publication from OpenDai on data spaces for energy home mobility, which will be discussed and presented also next week. What we do is we support projects, research and innovation projects under Cluster 5. About 40 million will be invested in new projects, which starts this autumn, to provide flexibility mechanisms to create the building blocks, actually, for flexibility in distribution networks and to create a marketplace for energy services. core of the project is that we have to spur open innovation. Otherwise, you cannot reuse the building blocks. We need also to see, what other sort of projects support open approaches and open source. And we need a horizontal strategy in order to steer the projects, put it together, and promote the building blocks developed. That's our task, and we work with you, and we also launched a CSA on that one called Internet, which will be launched soon. So most important is my last slide. If you talk about open source, as mentioned, you need to talk about open APIs, you need open data models for data economy, and you need the open source project to be aligned on that. Most essential, this is the important ingredients to create a vibrant community. Community building is the most essential part of the open source endeavor and the initiative. So the cornerstone of open source is the open standards and APIs, the vibrant community, and agreed principles on governance and steering. So I put up some pictures, some sketch, what could be the future work and the future roadmap on that. We worked a lot on reference architecture models at the moment to be aligned on to have a common baseline, but it's not sufficient. I think we need industry feedback on what we call minimal interoperability mechanisms as pivotal points for interoperability. So these are the minimal things to achieve, to develop a viable market, to cut costs, and to respond to urgent needs in the market. So there we need the industry feedback, where to focus on, what are the essential interfaces and the standards. And we need building blocks which are reusable, which are plug and play, which are clearly documented. And that is done, and that can be done by Linux projects or can be done supported by the H2020, the Horizon Europe projects. And we also need sort of a repository where to find the information and how to navigate for newcomers to use these building blocks and the work done in the different associations. And the question is, where you find that, where we bring the community together is my question to you. Think about a forum to bring the different very dynamic initiatives together. And how do we do that? And how could we organize ourselves in Europe and around the world in order to benefit from this vibrant community? So that's my main message. For sure, we'll meet next week doing the EUSEF in different sessions. We have a digitalization block on Tuesday. And quite important for you as well is that the system operators have to move fast. They have to be modern, they have to be flexible, they have to be digital. And the open source community is rich in knowledge. The cooperation gives you some benefit, particularly in time and speed, to bring solutions on the market. And that's an opportunity. And I hope you can grasp the opportunity and we can do it together. Thank you, and wish you a stimulating event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rolf, for your presentation, and the best of success for the EUSEF week. It is full of advanced and very much a rich number of stakeholders in good disposition towards what is going to make the electricity scenario better and faster. I have just one question for you, which has reached me in a few minutes ago, and it is the following. What is, in your opinion, as far as these technological framework that you depicted, the main resistance to change? In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, I think the main resistance change is to embrace a data strategy. A digital strategy is different from the strategy of a system operator, because you talk about sharing data and losing the control of your data, and to understand what is the platform economy and what we know from the Googles and the Amazons. And that's a cultural shift. It's a cultural shift between digital and the energy operators. And we have to embrace that shift. And I think particularly talking to the different communities from both sides, it's a good opportunity to bring the different stakeholders together to learn from each other, particularly also in open source projects, and to do the next step and the next decisions.
Thank you very much. Very clear, very concise, and very detailed. So, and I think that we have got the right person here to make a connection also with that. Is our second keynote speaker, and is Bram Zeeman, is Director, Corporate and Social Affairs of Alliander, one of our Dutch members, and very much advanced in innovative applications on the grid. Bram, you have got the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and also thank you, Antonello and Ro, for your speeches and stimulus for the open source development. I must say, for us, it's an important topic for Alliander, and I think most of us here will understand the importance, and I hope we can make take it to the next level as well, also during the panelists, but also with the many questions and the many people that are here, to make sure that we start this culture shift, as just what Rolf just mentioned. Because I think for us, open source is a strategic theme already. We've been working on this for a couple of years already, and I think highly important if you look to the many different challenges that we're facing today. I will just go briefly because I think also in the way that the DSOs are actually changing their roles as well, seeing the roles that need to be changed. If you look at the volatility in the system, it increases. The dependency on availability of electricity, especially the last couple of months, I think we've seen also that the dependency also increases. And therewith, I think the interdependency in the system between all the producers and all the consumers and all the roles who are mixed even further in the next couple of years will increase significantly. If you look at the situation in the Netherlands today, and also in the situation in our grid as well, I should say we already have a too high number of congested areas in the grid. So if you look, it's mostly at peak demand, I should say. But I think therewith you directly see the importance of system operations and also the need for flexibility, but also to be flexible, and also the need for having insight in the actual grid and be able to work on this as well. As an example, I think everyone knows Amsterdam, the Amsterdam area. We are facing, we need almost twice the available capacity that we have now in the grid in the next 7 to 8 years. So this is the same thing we've built over the past 40 years. And this is still only on if you look at the transformer and from a cable perspective, you should say, well, it should fit, it should be able. We're definitely striving for it as well. Then if you look, do you have enough public space? Is there enough workforce? I think all throughout Europe, the technical workforce is on a stress level. And are there actually, can we definitely have, with all the supply chain issues now as well, find all the materials and resources which are needed? The thing is, if you look more closely, the available capacity should be doubled, but it's mostly talking about peak demand, because during non-peak hours, there's so much capacity available in the grid. So becoming flexible, but is a necessity. This is something the market has to do, but this is also something we have to facilitate. So taking care of system security is so important and becoming even more important, and it requires really continuous, I should say, real-time and detailed insights into every part of the grid. So for us, of course, as I think this is developing all throughout Europe, digitalization is a key answer. And for us, it's also, that's why we made open source an important strategic theme, because we're seeing it's not a straightforward software implementation package, right? How we actually achieve this. We should be adaptive enough and make sure we include all the latest and smartest insights from our customers. I'm glad this is also, I think, Rolf, what you just mentioned, but I also see it at various levels in the Netherlands, but also at the European level, there is a significant stimulus on a policy level. We're heading, I think, in the right direction with the data interoperability and data access development as a collaborative with TSOs, DSOs, and with the Commission and with market parties. And also, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but also I think the data government developments in the Netherlands that we're doing as DSOs and TSOs, and also with all the suppliers and all the new energy service providers, I think is heading in a way that stimulates the collaborative culture, perhaps, that we should adopt to make sure this the whole digitalization, and I think the whole system will change as required. So why open source then for Alliander? Because I think it also starts, and this is something I would like to stress for the rest of the session as well. It starts with ourselves. It requires leadership, definitely. It requires that you challenge assumptions. But I think there's so much to gain if you look at it from the learning perspective. Many of my colleagues are going through and are still going through and have been through. So open source for us, I think many of the good sides have been mentioned. It stimulates interoperability and prevents also a vendor lock-in. It drives knowledge development amazingly. So I think it's using the knowledge and the intelligence that is there in the community has been very valuable for us, and is going to be even more valuable if you look how widespread you can actually gain access and develop with the use of the community in this way. It's improving. It's definitely also something that we see. It's improving quality and robustness, also within the system operations functions that we're developing. But also, of course, we face challenges, right? So I think there's many challenges here. Perhaps one of the basic things is the assumptions that we have. If you look at it from a security or from a cost perspective, as collaborations among TSOs and DSOs, I think we are seeing some good projects, but I don't think it's at the scale that we need. And I think also, Rolf, you mentioned some of the frameworks, some of the data structures that need to be implemented, that need to be there. But also starts with just, I don't know, developing. Like I'll show some examples later that we're also doing this together. I think Antonella, you mentioned it as well, also from the Linux Foundation Energy, that we see that we're doing this together with RTE and others. I hope, and I really hope, we're not leaving this until the urgency will be there, right? I hope I also stressed with the example I just gave with the city of Amsterdam, and we have this in various parts in our grids, but also if you look at the rise of the gas prices and electricity prices, although there's a cap, and although there's a policy stimulus now coming, I'm quite scared if you see how much of the heating sector, the heating infrastructure in the Netherlands is based on gas. We actually start to shift away and become more and more electricity based at a very individual level. So the amount of insights that we need, if you look at the low voltage grid, is going to be incredible, and it's going to be a big challenge. I think this is some of the urgency that is developing, and I really hope we can show collaborativeness and leadership to prevent this urgency from us to driving this, also the open standards and the open source development theme. I mentioned already, so together with RTE and also with Aachen University, I think it's good that we are also developing some software stacks. So OpenStaff is, I think, a very nice example for us, where we are looking at the forecasting of load for the grid for the next hours of the day. And it's a very important enabler for us for active congestion management. Another example is the power grid model, which is actually a Python library for steady-state distribution power system analysis and power flow calculations and state estimation. And I think it's incredible to have such types of software, which are very fundamental as well. If you look at how to become a system operator and actually be a system operator and be this of a high, reliable quality, that it's, I think, a very good way forward that we're doing this with the partners I just mentioned. And I hope there's going to be way more partners in the coming years to do so. We have institutionalized internally an open source program office as a strategic program. And I hope some of my colleagues that will be here as well have contacts with other DSOs and TSOs, but we need to have this kickstarting together of this of tackling these challenges that will be there. I would say please Google Alliander and open source. I think it's more valuable. You will see more examples on what we do, how we do this. Contact me, contact my colleagues, and I hope we will be having a very constructive session for today. Also a fun session, and let's embrace it from a very positive side, and let's see how we can all tackle the bottlenecks that are there, and make sure we all set a good step ahead today. Thank you, Roberto.
So, thank you very much, Brian. I've got a question for you, very fresh, and it's coming from Frank Martin and says, are there some hyperlinks to the tools just mentioned, such as the Python library for power grid models, etc.? Can we maybe answer later to this, or do you have something immediate there?
Sorry, then the first part, what do we have?
Hyperlinks to the tools.
Hyperlinks.
Yeah.
Definitely. If you Google, sorry, I can perhaps send you the hyperlinks as well, but I'm very sure if you Google Alliander and open source, you will go directly to our open source website where all the projects are mentioned. And there's also, please connect me. Yeah. Okay.
If I may ask, you just copy paste the access link to the chat, and it will be great. Then another little service note: the recording and the presentation for those who use presentations will be available at the end of the seminar on our website. So now, without further ado, once more, let me invite Jean-Marc Moulin, Transmission and Distribution Vice President at General Electric Digital, Grid Solution of General Electric. Jean-Marc, please take the floor. Jean-Marc is not in need of presentations. His organization is one on the forefront of advanced technology as far as transmission and distribution technologies and solutions are concerned. They recently held in Paris an impressive, really impressive convention for workforce, sales force, and top customers. I had the pleasure to attend there, and it is there that I said, well, we must invite this guy to our open source session because it is the counterpart and the response of the industry cooperating with the DSOs and TSOs in providing solution here. So you have the floor, and please tell us something nice about your solutions in terms of open sourcing and exploiting open source.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roberto. I hope you can hear me well and the screen share is working. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm the T&D product manager for Grid Software, which means EMS, DMS, and the things that help our utility customers control the network. Because in the end, we're a vendor. We're not controlling the network ourselves. And we're fully cognizant of that. So to the question, is open source the next big thing in electricity distribution? Well, we'll get there. I wanted to start first with a few drivers. Some of them were already explained by some of the previous members, like Mr. Rwth, sorry, I have difficulties with the full name pronunciation, or Mr. Monty. I think when we look at the 4D mega trends that are transforming our industry, decarbonization, digitalization, decentralization were known for some time. I think the democratization was probably overlooked. How each and individual customer is actually gonna have a growing impact on our industry is something we need to take further into account. And that's one of the levers that we need to use in a better way. And that's calls for better flexibility. And without going to all the drivers, I like this International Energy Agency prediction for net zero by 2050. But what I think is the most interesting in all of that is between 2020 and 2030, and we all know by nature that any prediction will turn out to be wrong. Still, it's a prediction based on declaration of members. We're going to double the amount of renewable penetration. And this ties back to what our keynote of Alenda was saying. The change is immense. And then what we've done in the last 40 years, we need to do in the next 10. And then there is a next aspect to that in terms of systems. It's that we used to build our systems, and I am a supplier of those siloed systems long time back. They are integrated today, mostly. We need to build this connected and orchestrated system. And this is true about T and D, but it is also true about D to D. How do you better connect and orchestrate with your neighbors to get to this open source, open data, open interoperability aspect of things that is going to help the entire community rise up to the challenge? Without that, it's not going to work. So I have here a slide, and to the point made by Mr. Monti before, it's probably already outdated. I just looked at the system operators who are participating in LF Energy, and I'll come back to that, or the Global PST Consortium, who hosts some of the most leading edge customers in terms of renewable integration. And they both have in common one thing. They are looking at open platforms. Now, when we look at open source, what are the key questions and concerns? Community. Is it complex? Is it complex to manage open source? Can it be vendor agnostic? Is it free? Actually, there is a saying in English that there is no free lunch. Is it performing? Does it scale? Can it be at the level of performance that you need? And availability, by the way, which is another keyword that is missing on this slide. Can it be performant and scalable and available as we need it, which is the 4 to 5 nines? Is it secure? That's usually one of the first questions we get when we speak of the fact that we're using open source software in our stack, is the security aspect of things. And I'll come back to that. Can we support it? And this is sustainable. How will it evolve over time? Those are the questions we need to answer as at least a vendor. And why do we, as a vendor, see advantages to open source software? It allows us to focus on the real problems impacting the grid. How do we make segues into things that matter and that are unique to our industry, such as addressing the renewable penetration, the stability aspects, the synthetic inertia, and some of those distributed energy impact, variability. Those are key to our industry. Do we need to reinvent the wheel on all the rest of the IT and OT systems? We believe not. And this is where we believe open source software can help us as a group, as a community, to get more value so that we can focus on the real problems at hand that are going to define our common future. Because it's a common future. We as vendors are only a portion of the ecosystem. You, the DSOs, and so are the TSOs, are the ones operating the networks. So we have this initiative that we call Digital Energy. That is the enabler for digital transformation. It's outcome-based, targeting things that you, our customers, can feel. About faster cycle times. You are asking us to go faster. You are asking us for out-of-the-box interoperability. You are asking us to get new apps without needing to upgrade, which one day may become a word of the past, but today it's still something that does exist. Ability to take new apps without wholesale upgrades. Of course, quality, scalability, flexibility. And it involves a wide range of activities. And we are developed a set of, we call it foundation, a set of curated, tested, security tested containers and microservice based architecture so that we can actually raise up to the challenge that you're asking us to raise up to. So we build our modular composable applications across all functional domains on this foundation. It's true across transmission, distribution, it's true for DERMS. It's even true for something that is quite real-time as WAMs, because you know that phasers need, and in the case of Brazil, they go to data acquisition 120 times per second, and the energy markets, because in the end, markets are one of the solutions to get to this energy transition. And this is deployable on the edge, on-prem, on cloud. Increasingly, the lines are blurred. Apps like forecasting are used across domain. We use it in T and D and for energy markets. Data sources are shared. And to the point that was made by Mr. Monti, it's a coexistence with some existing, robust, field-proven SCADA type applications with new applications. And we initially started to do that for ourselves. But actually, what our customers have asked us to do, and this is the direction we're going, is to go with customer apps on top of this and partner apps, leveraging a common stack. And this common stack, there is another thing to it. It's about building on top, but it's also building horizontally. Because if you can speak with the neighbors, if you can speak with what you utilities have developed on top of Kafka or Kubernetes, it gets us the next level of scalability. We can have an ecosystem with common stack that speak to each other. I spoke earlier of LF Energy and GPST. What are we doing today with LF Energy? We're a member of the Linux Foundation Energy, and we're basically primarily, I would say, involved in CPaaS and CompaSS. If you see on the right, it's about infrastructure and data and services. So basically, it's about primarily interoperability, common services that can be shared across, that can be vendor agnostic. And so we are participating in this effort as a member. We're evaluating further engagement models, more on the app side, but today we're primarily engaged with LF Energy on data and services and infrastructure. What's the benefit for us as a vendor? It's the access to a community of experts. It's not just our experts, it's a broader range of experts. It's leveraging existing code bases for new products and modules. It's a benefit, we believe, to the customers for an open source solution, at least for we believe, the data services and infrastructure layers that are key to ensure a better interoperability between systems. And yeah, to double down on this one, creating an interoperable ecosystem with third-party devices. So it's really enabling interoperability, accelerating time to value on things that are the common layers of infrastructure so that you, the utilities, can then assemble those Lego blocks together the way you want. So we're helping in this way. We may be less engaged on the application thing because we believe it's more our value add, but that's a choice, a G choice. And the more we contribute to the community, the more we get value from it. So I think that's the main lesson. It's about contribution. You get, there's a French expression about the Spanish hostel. It's, you get what you bring. The more you bring, the more you get. I think this is the key lesson. We're not neglecting that all that needs to be secure. So we're not trusting the software. We are testing it. And open source is no exception. We're building our open source software stack, and it's not our software, it's a compilation of existing open source software on a zero trust principle. And we're testing it every night for vulnerabilities. So this is key. So what are the key elements of success to adopt open source software? Respect a strict selection process. Maybe the second point is the most important. To have an open source software bill of material and execute extensive and regular security scanning. We do that on a nightly basis, and we release new tech stack on a quarterly basis. It ensures interoperability. And here I'm speaking between G and others, but it's broader. If we have supporting a common set of existing functions such as Kubernetes and Kafka, we can, and we have proof points with customers like Enaginet, we can ensure we can seamlessly communicate with the internal open source software community of the customer, and then all that data exchange becomes natural. Of course, we're also using standards. We're accelerating release rates. We deliver this on a quarterly basis. And clearly, we have an accountability for supportability of those items. So before I go to my two challenges, we believe we can be a reliable partner because we have all those elements, and we're totally in this journey together with our utility customers. Actually, the slide I showed 3 slides prior, when you had utility and partner applications on top of the platform, was an ask of our customers. It was not our original idea. So this is how we listen to the market. And I would like to finish with 2 open questions to the community. And interoperability, I think I could have removed the question mark. But for me, the next challenge is not so much open source as it is open data. We have seen the move in some countries, TSO or DSO, from proprietary data, I own the data, so I have the power, to sharing the data. Of course, you're not going to share the IP address of your servers. Of course, this is cyber secure, sensitive. But about the network, its characteristic. Sharing it allows the community to know about it. You get to a level playing field. You get all the actors to know about it, and you get actually, for the society, a bigger value. So my challenge to this community is open source is a way to get faster to interoperability. The next step for me is really about open data, to leverage all the levers we have to get together in this energy transition. Thank you for your attention.
And thanks to you, Jean-Marc, for this deep dive into the industrial vision of open source related to our sector. And we are very much happy to have invited you here because your last 2 questions are basic, and I am sure that they will also inspire the panel session that we are going to have now. So feel free to stay and to participate in some questions to the panel afterwards. But now I would like to invite for the panel session and roundtable discussion, which I will moderate, by the way, Lucien Baléa, whom is Open Source Program Director at RTE. Please, Lucien, join us on the screen. And then Eric Wolfs, whom is Architects Lead at E.DSO, with a great experience in the ITC frameworks that are related to transmission. Giuseppe Testa, Head of Commercial Services and Operation Technology Systems at Rwth. Rwth is one large distributor from Italy, belonging to the ASEA group in Rome, and is very much responsible of a megalopoly in Italy of the dimension like its capital. And last but not least, Laurent Schmidt, Head of Utilities and European Development at Decibel, and on top of that is the President of Digital for Grids. Both names here, Decibel and Digital for Grids, are self-explaining of the interest, the competence, and the experience of Laurent Schmidt, whom has also been Secretary General at E.DSO, the organization representing the transmission system operators. So thank you very much to you for being there. And
Did we lose Roberto? I can't hear anything.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Oh, okay. Yes, maybe I would suggest we continue. So if I'm not wrong, the idea was to start with a round of pitches from the four participants. So maybe Lucien, if you would like to start with your introduction statement.
Thank you, Antonello. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay. Great. So it's a pleasure to be invited to this important event. So I'm leading the open source strategy at RT, and I'm also involved in LF Energy as chair of the board. in a nutshell, so at RT, the open source journey started in 2018. And at that time, we looked at how other industries such as telecommunications, cloud internet, automotive, were leveraging open source, and they got really impressive leverage, both in terms of resources, but also in terms of speed of innovation. And in contrast, we were realizing that our traditional approach to software in our industry was lagging behind, that this monolithic and also proprietary lock-in of with our software did not perform according to our expectations. So not enough interoperability, not enough upgradability. The pace of innovation was not there. And open source is about collaboration, and these other industries, even among competitors, were leveraging this model successfully. So we realized that in our case, across grid operators, where there is not that competitive pressure, we are not competitors, and we are even converging in our approaches and the practices, because we have the same regulations that apply to us. So this would really make sense. So we partnered with the Links Foundation to launch LF Energy at that time, and very soon Alliander joined us on that initiative. And what I can say today, we have 6 projects in common with Alliander, spanning from virtualization of automation system in the substation to new HMI concepts for system operators. And for instance, there are projects that have been initiated by RT, and then Alliander joined those projects. And it's great for us because we benefit from the extra workforce that we get from Alliander. And vice versa, there are projects like OpenStep, Bram mentioned it previously, that were initiated by Alliander, and we joined those projects. And it's also great for us because we managed to join these projects with limited resources. So these were topics that we had on our roadmap, but we were not able to carry out those works because we couldn't find enough resources to do all the works. So when you can join an initiative that already has a very good basis and 80% of the work is done, you can leverage this and join it with minimal resources. And there are other projects where we just started the project in a community set up together with Alliander. So this has been very successful so far. And it also opens great perspectives for tomorrow, because if you look at the greatest challenges that we will have in front of us, the TSO-DSO interface is one of the most important ones. So how to increase interoperability and agility in that interface and increase data exchange. So we have, with open source, a very efficient collaboration model to work together within a community setup to elaborate on this interface. And it's good because it's the framework is really efficient from a governance and IP perspective. So you don't spend years to discuss the IP rules and set up your project, and then you get locked because there are divergent views from the community. In open source, it's based on simple rules, open access and meritocracy. So those who are willing just to be part of the project and invest and as Jean-Marc said, the more you invest, the more you benefit from them. It's working impressively well. So far our experience has been really successful. We are happy where we are, and we believe that the community will grow and welcome everybody to join us. I'm stopping here.
Thank you, Lucien. And I noticed that Roberto is back, so I don't want to.
Yes, and thank you very much, Antonello, for stepping in. It is the nightmare of a webinar unforeseen emergency works by Proximus on the cabin downstairs, and I got a cut for a while. So my apologies to the participants and the panels, and thank you, Lucien, for having opened this panel discussion. I would ask the same question that the introductory topic that Antonello used for Lucien, also for Eric Wolf. Eric, your role in E.DSO is crucial. You're architect's lead. You are very close to the TSO deployment. Complexity here. What comes out from your experience related to open system adoption as far as the big grid are concerned? You have the floor.
So good morning, everybody. So indeed, I'm working for both ENSO-E and Chorizo, which is a regional coordination center in Europe. And so I'm from the beginning, I think, when I started my work at the TSO world, doing European projects like market coupling systems and so on, we clearly understood that the only way to be successful is to go into the open source direction, because you have too many parties, too many vendors involved. So you really need the openness on all sides, also on the business logic, but also on the implementations. And this is only possible with open source solutions. Now, I also strongly believe that to make open source a success, you clearly need open standards. If you don't have standards, it will fail. And next to that, you need a clear domain model. I hear data models, but it's more than just the data. You need a clear domain model where you can clearly identify all your capabilities that you need. And then you can decide for which capabilities an open source solution is the best solution to implement. So that's what we did for the market coupling systems, and that's what we are now also doing. I'm building together with a lot of experts the platform that will be used to provide all the regional services. And here we go for full open source. So not only on the technical components and the Kafkas and the Kubernetes, but also on the business logic. We're going for possible, so that the platform provided by RTE. So I'm deeply involved in all this work. For the moment, more as a consumer, but we're really looking all what we do for in the RCC world now. How can we contribute that and bring it back in the community?
Thank you very much, Eric. You introduced an additional topic here, which is open standards. And maybe we can elaborate on that afterwards and seeing if open standards also mean closer cooperation between grid operators, both distribution and transmission, and the vendors, the industry that provides all the equipment that we regularly use. So, a view from the DSOs. Giuseppe Testa, Head of Commercial Services and Operation Technology at Rwth. Seen from Rome, how is it all of this, Giuseppe? Please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting panel and webinar. Thank you, Roberto, for bringing at the table a couple of different perspectives of the open source. So also a view from the vendor is very interesting to listen to. So basically, let me give a little few words about what we are doing in Rwth. We started from a very simple point. Basically, to deliver reliable electric power is priority one for modern distributors. This is to understand crystal clear. As we are facing many challenges nowadays, as increased renewable sources, energy storage, third parties, microgrids. We didn't touch this before, but also this is a new topic that is touching our grids. Increased level of electrification and, of course, climate changes. We think that we need to move towards dynamic smart grid. What do we mean by dynamic smart grid? We mean a more flexible, intelligent, proactive, cyber secure, and interoperable technical digital platform. What are we doing in Rwth? We aim to build a custom advanced distribution management system that is a platform that leverages current and future IoT digital assets, talking about meters, RTU, breakers, sensor, and that will enable mission critical services. So not only subsidiary services like analytics and data exchange, but also mission critical services. I'm talking about fault location and resolution, power flow estimation, load prediction, and more. Under the technical point of view, the platform will be based on a multi-service cloud architecture with as much open source software and as less vendor lock-in as possible. So I'm not saying that we are going to use 100% open source, but for sure, as much open source as possible. Let me add a few points. Regarding a wider approach, we are strengthening the collaboration within the ecosystem. That means leveraging all existing communities. We are going to be part of the LFE community in a very few days. Facilitate discussion among players. I had the chance to talk with Alejandro and RT in our path to decide to move to the open source platform. I really thank them. And we are trying to build a common open technical platform. Let me stress this point a little more. As we are seeing these days with the EU Council regulation about demand reduction, we read a lot on the newspaper, maybe too much. What we think is that it would have been far more easier if all the DSO had at least the same agreed and common microservices to manage load shifting, for example, and avoid very different implementation, which probably is going to bring different impact of consumer behaviors, and at the end, maybe probably very different results country by country. Therefore, what I'm saying here is not to have the same technology, of course, but maybe a small common service catalog. And this can be easily achieved through open source and open source communities. So when we say open standard, as we mentioned before, we really believe in open standards. And we really believe that for basic and common services, we have to really agree on the same standard. So we can act at the same, on the same way. I don't know if I also answered the question, Roberto, you put on the chat.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Thank you very much for this. And now I would like to ask Laurent for a first comment on this first round. Laurent, you are technically speaking a so-called evangelist of advanced solutions in the TSO first, and then in the general area of interoperability and let's say the most advanced applications in our business. What is your immediate feeling here?
So thank you, Roberto, and good morning to everyone. And first of all, congratulations, I think, to all these initiatives which have been made in the open source space, particularly the Linux Foundation, which is kind of starting a very interesting initiative in the energy space. I would like to come back a bit to the root of REPowerEU, if you don't mind, and to the risk which we start to hear about blackout about the need to accelerate on renewable. And I would like to make this point to make sure that we really focus the benefit of open source onto business process and cases which are trying to resolve the short-term issue which we face into our system. Maybe one of the difficulty with open source is for the moment it's still very much an innovation-driven R&D long-term. And the question which I see is whether we should not look at it through a different perspective, which is how can we accelerate? And I would like, if we move to the next slide, I have 3 slides only, to accelerate in view of the tsunami, which is happening right now, which we are talking about connecting 40 million homes in Europe, in the same time with vehicle-to-grid bidirectional charging, as well as PV self-consumption. So, and how to make this home, I would say, reactive, responsive, into balancing markets, into TSO, DSO, coordination, and so on, and managing the orchestration behind it. I think that is really what is at stake. It takes today almost 10 years to get a wind turbine offshore. It takes 6 months to get a PV panel on a roof. And it, especially if it's integrated through an energy community, which minimize the impact on the grid in terms of congestion. So I would really advocate as a starting point and a first comment to focus the effort on the open source community about this very crucial topic about putting renewable and flexibility into the system and avoiding maybe situation like in Amsterdam, where we have our time now to connect that kind of resources. The point the next slide, I wanted to make the point that we are at an ideal situation because control room architecture have been changing. I think very good presentation from Jean-Marc. There is now a complete set of environment which allows to really build and connect and plug applications from different environments through microservices, Kubernetes, and real-time environments. So it is a very good news from a technology angle. Maybe the challenge I would like to make here to TSOs and DSOs is that means that you also need to change the way you buy this system, moving away from turnkey large systems and giving the commitment to a single vendor and moving into yourself becoming the integrator of these subsystems together. So I think that's the challenge of integrating this into your roadmap is probably high, because that means you can go fast, but maybe with higher risk. So the question is how to evolve into this environment. If we move to the next slide, for me, it's fundamental to base all this onto agreed data dictionary and agreed data model. And I would like to come back onto IEC models here. So we have IEC models in the distribution and in the transmission side. And what I've seen into open source so far, sometimes it is actually very fragmented, small communities, only few developers around, I would say, a piece of software, simply because this piece of software is country specific, very specific to a single TSO or few TSO or DSOs, and very hard to reuse on a worldwide basis. So basically, having common standards and making use of these standards and developing interoperability on these standards is absolutely fundamental. And these smart grid data dictionary are very, very important to agree and to develop in the open source environment. And then the last slide I would like to say is to come back into no, that's LEF Energy. I think we largely talked about. Congratulations, and these are very interesting technology stack discussed. A layer which I think is crucial is between this technology stack, and that's really the grid edge integration strategy. And how can we agree all together through this community about using open source to really manage event streaming across all these environments? And here I'm taking the hat of the grid edge side, and it's where we develop platform for prosumer data management. And how do we make sure that we use standards like Kubernetes, standards like Kafka? I think Kafka is a very foundational open source environment, and we all together agree on how to interconnect this environment through these common data layers. That would really be very interesting. So Environment, Kafka was mentioned by GE. It's a long history of Kafka. The question is whether GE is going to open its Kafka to other vendors' environments. So I think that's something which we together need to agree on, how to develop common interfaces through Kafka and leverage this new data model from consumers, vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, upward to a balancing and congestion management into transmission and distribution grids. That was my very short introduction.
Well, short but exhaustive, Laurent. Thank you very much for this. And let us start from here. We have been hearing about open standards. Laurent comes with de facto a proposal of big convergence between users and manufacturers in searching best available solutions, not only, but also the more widely usable solutions. So my question here, to what extent this convergence is possible between DSOs, TSOs, and industry? I mean, we have got still General Electric listening, and possibly also, if you wish, Jean-Marc, joining the discussion here. Do you think that a conference about the future of this cooperation between the users and suppliers is now possible to be organized? First question. Second one is, and here, Rwth, if you are still there, as I see, if you feel like, is it possible to imagine that there is, let's say, a patronage from the institutions for a big convergence between users and suppliers in this respect, for the sake of advancing more rapidly towards the energy transition? Another question, please. We are not compelled to follow the order that we had, but Lucien, if you were the first, you listen to the others. If you have an impression here, please offer it.
Yeah.
Eric, Giuseppe, Jean-Marc, and Rwth.
Sure. So I think that today we have momentum for this, let's say, higher convergence or collaboration between end users and technology vendors, etc. I think it's inevitable, because we will have to build a digital system that will be more interconnected and even beyond the boundaries of single organizations and across various processes. So we have to think about modular architecture with many more interconnections, and this will require, from the end user perspective, to have a greater role. So you cannot imagine that you will buy a monolithic, let's say, IT platform that will perform everything. So end users will have to help and guide the vendor ecosystem to this target, and through this kind of open collaboration, we can make sure that we build this modular, interoperable ecosystem. And also, with what is important is, through these open collaboration models, we can do it with reasonable resources. So we are not saying that we need to build an internal capability at each grid operator to do everything alone. It's increasing our competence and capability to be able to better articulate with an ecosystem of vendors, developers, etc. that will collaborate on this. And we see also an important role from the institutions such as the European Commission to guide us into that direction. There are already some tools like the Horizon frameworks that fund important projects for the future. And my conviction is that incentivizing open source collaboration through these frameworks would benefit for the whole ecosystem. First of all, we will make sure that results from one project could be reused by other projects, so we will minimize, let's say, double investments, and also this would ease the transition from the R&D phase to the industrialization phase. That is a real challenge, how to transform results from these European R&D projects into real implementations. And we are already seeing a few projects at LF Energy that are the continuation of previous Horizon projects. So that's a great outcome.
Thank you very much. So any other remarks here? Eric, maybe?
As I can say, to make this a success, we also need a change of mindset on the TSO and the DSO side. And so I remember when I joined Chorizo, there was no IT department because it was very simple. The business had requirements. The requirements were sent to a vendor. The vendor built a black box solution that was implemented, paid, and case done. But now the business is changing so fast that this model is not workable anymore. And when I look now on Chorizo as a small company, the IT department, we are with 20 people. We have DevOps, we have business analysts, we have architects. And so to make open source work, you need this cooperation. But for the cooperation, you need to be able to understand each other. And so you need on both sides, on the vendor side and on the TSO, DSO side, the people who can communicate with each other and who understand and who can assist, cooperate, because otherwise it will not work.
Giuseppe, are these abilities available?
Yes, they are. They are, but I think that we cannot fight the market, and the market is not yet mature to go to the standards and collaboration. What we can do is to facilitate collaboration, and we are on the right way. If more DSOs and TSO collaborate, more DSO and TSO goes to communities, open source community, whatever kind of community, the more the market will recognize that it's something that is moving, and the market will follow us. Because at the end, money rules. So we cannot fight the market again, but I agree with Lucien. There is a momentum that we can take now.
Well, we have got the other side of the market here. Jean-Marc, what do you think about this?
Well, actually, I was going to complement what Eric said, and to a certain extent, Laurent also. No one is going to, in isolation, invent the solution that's going to save us tomorrow, and the pace of change that we're facing is unprecedented. So more collaboration, more data exchange, more open source exchange, more interoperability are needed for us as a community, the vendors, the end users, the DSOs, the TSOs, the DNOs, the aggregators, to create together a solution, because no one has a brain big enough to figure it out. And what is more interesting, I believe, is that we know what we don't know. And we know we don't know much on what's going to happen in 5 years. Some countries like Ireland are leading the way because being an island, they are confronted to the issues earlier than some other countries. So we can have examples in some of GPST members, for example, but it just gives us a part of the solution. So I believe in more collaboration, and it's not meaning to say that to the point that was made by Mr. Monti, it's going to be an hybrid, and the hybrid is going to gradually shift to more open source and more collaboration. And it's not a big bang. It's not going to happen in one day. It's a journey, but it's going to go there faster than everyone believes in this room.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. This is, as one could say, concrete optimism on the side of the industry. Before turning back to Laurent and Antonello, sorry, Rwth, can the institution be helpful in this process? And in your opinion, without engaging you in promises or declaration you cannot make, obviously, what is the stance? What is the attitude in providing, let's say, a legislative policy umbrella to a possible cooperation to step forward in a quicker way on this area?
Yeah, I think, as we heard, I think first of all, thanks, Jean-Marc and Eric. I think great talks. I really appreciate your input. Also, Laurent, what the institution can do, as we talked about, a cultural shift, meaning, on the one hand, going from away from linear system design to going sort of designing systems which have services across different, so far separate domains. And if you talk about systems which are relevant for the energy market, we have the E.DSO, we have the E.DSO, the control room, but increasingly we have automotive companies and appliances and solar inverters. So all these sorts of different heterogeneous actors come together. So what the institutions can do, obviously, yes, you have to go faster. We need building blocks. So far, we have a good track record in supporting collaborative research projects, where you get access to skilled people with a good education, and you can have collaboration, and you can work on building blocks on different levels, and that gives you a lot of momentum. But also, as said, I think that's not enough. We need this industrial guidance. We need sort of common domain models. We need to demonstrate in industrial demonstrators the power of the new services, open source services, like Kafka, like microservices, which allow actually to create applications and services across the different domains. I think that's not necessary in order to manage energy, to avoid peaks which occur in different circumstances, in different situations, and in different domains, as well as have the flexibility from local markets, from consumer markets, from local markets to regional and to the national markets. So here, yes, I think we want to work with you as industry. I think we think about an expert group guiding us, in order to guide us on the horizontal measures I mentioned, to creating these building blocks and focusing on the industrial standards and the interoperability, as well as reference architecture models. We're thinking of an expert group under the Smart Grid Digital Task Force, separate, focusing really on these digital problems, looking on how to deal with this volatility of markets and the urgency of actions, and how to embrace, this community building, which is needed for an open source strategy.
That is promising, if I could say. And I would like now to re-engage Laurent, if you there. Yes, you're on the screen. You displayed a couple of impressive slides in your presentation with a wide complexity of names and systems and possibilities to integrate all of this. After this short discussion, necessarily too short discussion that we had, what is your impression? Is the time mature for a conference production among the parties in order to move forward on not only on open source, but also on the concepts of open standards and open data?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating discussion, and I think what we really size through the exchange is the open source is a done deal into the innovation space and in the Horizon project and so on. And really the challenge is how to scale this into the industrialization phase and how to do it in steps which are fast enough in view of the tsunami of which is happening at the edge of the system. Here, I think it goes into how to create this group, which does not only think on open source for development's sake, but also open source for deployment's sake. And in relation to certain data, which all data is not open, just to the question of Jean-Marc, we need to be careful. Some data is consumer protected. And so this is about more smarter data exchange, right, more than open data exchange, and the consumer consent is also an important processes into this environment, but and then go into some domain like what I know from the US as an example, which have moved into user groups. SIM user group is an interesting example where they do not only invent standard, they also test, they also push for vendors to demonstrate interoperability. I know, and so he has done it with a CGM, and which really foster and facilitate deployment of certain of these components across these various domains. The other element I would really like to advocate is, in view of what Rolf said, I'm a true believer about bridging this data space and moving away from, I am a grid operator, I know perfectly my grid and my RTUs and my substations. The problem of the grid operator, he will have to know at least 10 to 100 times more data from outside his boundary of substation. And so that means he will need to look at data from cars, at data from homes, data from heat pumps. And so here there is really an interesting work, I think, which we could try to accelerate in a way, is creating these data layers and this interoperability between the consumer environment and the DSO and so on, to avoid maybe overinvestment in extra sensors for real-time monitoring of low voltage into the distribution network, as an example. So it's this really digital of energy action plan can really be an accelerator if we agree on the right data structure and on the right core technology to exchange this data across the various vendors and technology providers.
Let's go reverse, because you put other bricks in this perimeter, which is very important. Giuseppe, do you think that what is Laurent proposing, it is viable for a normal DSO, even if very well advanced? Is that from the point of view of an industry and an entrepreneur, a viable thing to put in the quick execution plans of an industry or not?
It should be. It should be. Laurent is right. We need to go into that direction, of course. We cannot avoid or we cannot have still, let's say, or act as a dominant player just because the regulation. We have to open ourselves, open our data, open our standard, and also we do not have to believe that we are right always. Maybe someone else is doing something better than we think, and we have the let's say the behavior of taking what someone else is doing better than we do. And Laurent is right when we say we probably know our grid better than anyone else, but it's not the old grid. New grid is different. We have something that we cannot control, like the time a customer charged their vehicle. The sun, you know, it's completely different from what we did in the past. So we have to open our mind in terms of considering all these different scenarios.
Thank you very much. And I would ask the same question to Lucien Baléa. Do you think that the same apply to the TSOs? Are they ready to go on this humbleness path that has been described by Giuseppe Testa?
I fully agree with what was said, and also I think we should trust the open governance model for that, because by opening ourselves, we also allow pollination from external viewpoints, from external innovation. People that we don't know today, and maybe we even don't have connection, can bring their own point of view and ideas, and then you can start collaborating. And also in this open governance models, there is some kind of emulation, or even sometimes competitions with meritocracy. That's also that might be the right approach, because we can't plan today. We don't have the solution, as was said previously. We don't know what the future will be. And we even don't have all the knowledge at the TSO level, and I guess it's the same at the TSO level to build that. So having this way of working, and also considering that we will not be able to form a consortium with all the parties, and like in the traditional model, the closed consortium cannot work. There are too many people potentially involved. So this is an opportunity for us to open ourselves and yeah, benefit from the diversity of viewpoints that can be brought from the external world. So that's the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Rolf, you have a yellow hand on your image, please.
Yes, I just want to respond. I think the concept of Laurent are quite encompassing and challenging, but these are generic concepts at the first place. We cannot expect that each DSO or the TSO become a full digital company from one day to the other. We cannot expect that they have the skills and the knowledge like a Tesla, who can develop a new control system or digital system from scratch, from overnight. So we need to focus on the key issues, key interoperability issues, in order to have sort of a path, a transition from avoiding the worst, doing better, or becoming a service provider of modern services and integrating different services. So that's why I think the discussion, what I call it, a MIMS, minimum interoperability, in order to have the minimum service at the first place and then to have a transition. This discussion would be very valuable, not preempting the outcome that we have a full sketch digital system at the end, but at least you know what are the iterative paths and what are the priorities at the first place.
Okay. Very, very interesting remark. We shall have, let's say, a thermometer into the real temperature of the efforts of the DSO, mainly after this debate in a video. But this is very interesting to be also discussed. Eric, please, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just want to add that this translation also has an impact on the vendors. So they have to completely change their business model, where for the moment they make the money on their intellectual property, and now they have to change it to a more support corporate model. And so also on them it has an impact. And so what I often do in projects is not directly go for open source, but something what I call shared source. So we clearly identify stakeholders, who are the customers, who are the vendors, and we sign a contract that we will share the property, the intellectual property between us. And then later on, you can indeed see, okay, does it make sense to also give it to the community? Yes, and this is, in a lot of cases, more acceptable for the vendors than directly say, well, we go for open source and we throw your source code in the open.
Thank you very much. Laurent, you asked in the preparation calls for this webinar if you could have been provocative to some extent. Well, I told you absolutely, that's why you're there, and you demonstrated that. But what is your assessment here now with these, let's say, gradual evolution that is indeed bylines and between the lines of what Rwth, Giuseppe, now Eric have mentioned?
So what I really take, and this is the hard part, and I don't have, of course, answers to all the question, is the question is a transition path, and how to go into the step from a monolithic vendor control room environment, which we heard from Jean-Marc does not exist anymore. That's a good news. Into something which is basically more fragmented, and where grid operators, but we talk about grid operators, but let's be honest, aggregator have the same problem, so it's exactly the same question. Can take piecemeals of elements and use interoperability. And I think the approach of Rwth of starting with minimal and defined under certain profiles and conformance of this minimum profile is a way to start with baby step, and also not start with the entire retrofit of a control room, but maybe create a data sandpit, I would call it that way, around the control room, which kind of try and mirror a parallel integration from various subsystems up to a point where the maturity is enough and can put the system into production. And another element is not to exclude historical monolithic vendor, but to bring an ecosystem. And the key, I think the vendor by itself cannot bring this ecosystem because he has his own vetted interest. And it should be the grid operator in his role of becoming an integrator in a way to put together the piecemeal approach of what he finds is the most relevant across the industry. And so that's a difficult path, but I think that could be a way to move forward.
Thank you very much. We have Jean-Marc willing to, let's say, counterpoint your vision, probably. Jean-Marc.
Yeah. So just to be clear, what we hear from our customers is they are not ready for the big bang. There are things that will remain in the secure zone, SCADA, maybe the real-time state estimation. So let's all be clear, because we cannot be as vendors ignoring what our customers are telling us. But at the same hand, they want study mode, they want DTS, dispatcher training simulation, they want analytics, they want a lot of things to be deployable where they want it. And it may be on-prem or on cloud, and it depends. But the key for us is to be able to deploy at the point of impact. And the point of impact may depend depending who we speak to. That being said, we have examples that some customers, such as ONS in Brazil, has deployed real-time WAMs on a Kubernetes cluster in production. So the boundaries are getting blurred, as I said earlier. And I totally agree with Laurent. No one vendor will have the entire solution. I will, of course, fight for my IP as a vendor, as everyone would expect me to. But the open layers, the communication layers, and all those lower communication layers need to be open, because we'll need to get more and more exchange. And we have numerous examples of customers who have actually pushed us to open architecture to get this enterprise world more open. The core system may remain still locked for some time because the customers don't want it unlocked, but the percentage of things that are going to become common is growing exponentially.
Thank you very much. I noticed that Rwth has taken his jacket off. Is that a fighting mode that you have adopted, Rwth, here? Or it is simply a question of temperature? Joking, of course, but I've got a request of you. So this gradual approach that you were advocating 10 minutes ago has ignited a series of reaction there. Before we close this debate, we are at the last half dozen minutes available here. What do you suggest the industry to do to proceed on a concrete way that might be geared with the expectations of the institutions?
Yeah,
I know you do not have the crystal ball, but in your optimistic view, as an officer of a well-reputed officer of the Commission.
I think what is recommended for industry is, first of all, don't reinvent the ball yourself. I think that's quite clear. And what's our task from the Commission, but also when we want to work together with member states, is we want to promote best practice. And I think Laurent mentioned it mainly, we have to work on this cross data layer, a data layer across heterogeneous systems. I mentioned Gaia X as an industrial association. They also have one branch on the data space for energy. We have some forward-looking, very innovative initiatives in the Netherlands with the what they call the Afsprakenstelsel, or in Denmark or in Austria. So basically in smaller member states to already show, how different does the stakeholders work together on a common data strategy. Yes, I think we have to move fast, but we cannot, change the world from one day to the other. And we should not reinvent. So I think particularly also for to have this common understanding, we have to link the different bits and pieces together. And the second point, which I made earlier, is to focus on the most urgent part. I think it was mentioned that what creates the biggest headaches for the system operators. It's the peaks. It's the peaks in the system. That come from solar, that come from wind, and that may come also from the consumer. So you need to share the signals at an early stage, before or just before these peaks arriving. So how do you share this flexibility needs in an early thing? Although it's a communication exercise, but also it's an agreement on a common understanding on flexibility. So sharing the flexibility to the user, I think we had that, for instance, in Belgium a couple of years ago when there was a problem with the nuclear plants. We got a message, you're in a critical situation. So consumers reacting to these flexibility signals. I think with the solar, the distribution of solar panels in the district on the local level. You can have the weather forecast, so we can predict, when you might arrive at a peak. But certainly for the electric vehicle charging, I think these drivers are aware of increasing energy prices, but also they would be quite willing to react to be more flexible in their charging, and they are flexible in charging. And that needs an agreement between the charging point operators to make that happen, but also with the OEMs. And it does not require full access to data. You know, that doesn't require regulation that we get access to the data. It requires on a voluntary basis to share this flexibility signals and the willingness to be smart and to have a smart electricity consumption. So there are ways, you know, with the new data services to have smart ways to match demand and response, and then we should follow these ways as well.
Thank you very much, Rolf. And it is not frequent to have the Commission to be so realistic and outspoken in this debate. So my thank is a double thank also on behalf of the over 100 people that have been following this debate so far. Good. Now I would ask Professor Monti to briefly wrap before going to the presentation of a short video that we assembled following the results of the demonstration in the DSO world of open source. But Antonello, before you conclude, I would like you also to consider a question that is coming from the public and which is a question very much related to the key points that we have been tackling during this panel debate. The question comes from Luis Vallecuna and spells, should we expect a collaborative approach from vendors' side? For example, further collaboration between themselves, notably the ones that have been working with system operators during the last decades, translated into a less refined vocabulary, are the big guys, in your opinion, ready to share, first of all, among themselves for the benefit of the industry they are supplying? Question mark. And I would really appreciate an answer like this coming from the academia, from the university, because you see them all, and you see the operators, and you, Antonello, have the confessions on the shortcomings and on the best features that operators and industry can offer or are lacking. So it is quite unprepared and quite a burden on you, but please, since I know that you are down to fact guy, have the floor.
Okay, well, so first I answer directly the question you just raised. I think the easy way to answer this question is to look at the slide I showed about the Linux Foundation energy, because you see who is there, and if they are there, it means they're willing to cooperate. So we're talking about big guys. So big guys in energy, GE is here and is in that slide. We have Hitachi in that slide. So we have very good signals that some of the large vendors are understanding that this makes sense. So in that respect, this is happening. It's happening also on different side, which is relevant as well, which is the big guys in the IT sectors, because also for them, there is competition. We now expect more and more IT to play a role. And so it's a big competition among them. And in the Linux Foundation, we have energy, we have now as strategic members, some of the key companies like Google and Microsoft that are willing to cooperate. And we expect Apple to come, so they're going to customer, because at the end, that part is also critical to make sure we build a layer between customers and grid, because when you go into the home, is those guys, Google, Apple, that are really holding on the connection to the customers at this point. And so that is, in my view, happening. We need more. I don't think we are there because, again, my list of big guys is not complete. But we hope that by the example, I think the presentation we heard today from GE was fantastic in that direction. This will convince others we have been talking to, they've been thinking about, but they haven't taken the final step to join the foundation among the big vendors. But makes me confident this will help.
So that was a commercial wrap-up. But anyway, let me take the occasion to thank all of you panelists for your participation in this debate, and thank the keynote speakers. I think, and I'm not modest at all in this statement, that your participation has added value to this area of discussion. I particularly thank once again the openness that Rolf Riemenschneider has offered us, and the frank statements that we had from industries and ENTSO-E as well. So thank you very much for this. I ask Antonello to stay on screen. What we are going to see now is an edited video on the achievements of the DSOs following a couple of European projects in the area of open sourcing and advanced digital solutions. After these, the webinar will be concluded by José Ferrari Careto, whom you see already on the screen. José is the CEO of E.DSO of Portugal, and he has got a long history in the digital evolution applied to the electric power systems, especially distribution. And we shall go to him after the video and the experiences that will be now introduced by Antonello. Antonello, you have the floor, and please, the backup staff, which I thank here, Paula and Tiffany back at E.DSO, keep ready for the launch of the video. Antonello, please.
Thank you again, Roberto. Very briefly, so this video will report about basically, it's a merge of a set of videos that we've been doing in a variety of European projects. One, the more relevant, I would say, for discussion here today is Platone, where actually E.DSO is also a partner, is also a project that is working in tight connection with Universal, led vice versa by Rwth. So this is a very good example of openness in every direction. And we particularly focus here on showing how the open source approach that we propose has been embraced in the Italian demonstration, which brings back to what Giuseppe Testa has been saying about Rwth. So these have been the starting, I would say, of this journey in the cooperation with Rwth in building the platform that Giuseppe had been mentioning before. Together with that, there are also part of previous results. As you know, I think as Rolf was mentioning, the experience that Rwth is now capturing in their project is the result of a sequence of projects. The first one was called Sogno and was led by Ericsson, in which we developed the original idea of this platform that then was extended in Platone. What is really relevant on the extension in Platone goes back to many of the comments were done here in the discussion, which is we don't switch in a day. So the solution must be able to merge the new with the old, so we can preserve some part in the, let me call it, classical monolithic SCADA systems, at the same time having an opening that allows to integrate the new services that the DSO would like to integrate. And that's exactly what the demonstration in Italy is doing. That's exactly the architecture behind the project, which is using the Sogno platform for the open part and linking to the platform already available in Rwth as a solution. Same is happening in two other field tests, one in Germany with Abacon and one in Greece with Hedno, and with the same concept of combining, let me call it, the new with the old. But I don't want to take too much time with my introduction, so if you're ready to start, then the video will speak for himself, and there will be commentary also from other people, not just myself. particularly giving you information about the experiencing the what we call the Italian demo, which is the City of Rome demonstration.
Platoni is a Horizon 2020 funded European research project aiming to remove technical barriers for a carbon-free society by 2050.
Project Platoni provides concrete answer to distribution system operators that are facing the modern challenges related to energy transition and digitalization. We all know how the distribution grid is currently all across Europe under stress for the growing presence of renewables. This change is calling for more automation, digitalization, that is allowing the grid operator to make the best use of their infrastructure. Platoni offers a new generation of software solution which has several key ingredients that make the overall architecture. At the center, there is the E.DSO technical platform. The E.DSO technical platform is based on the Sonio platform, an open source microservice solutions that offers E.DSO the possibility to include services in a modular way.
Our partners build all the platform, the mechanism and equipment foreseen into the Platoni standard architecture.
The Platoni architecture is characterized by a dual-layer blockchain structure, and both layers are interoperable and pluggable in different market or distribution systems.
The platform is then enriched by a set of interfaces to the customers, because we want to bring customers at the center of the future power systems, and this interface is based on blockchain technology. Interface to the market, because flexibility is the key element for future power system to cope with the volatility of renewables. And last but not least, an interface to what we define in the project as legacy systems. All the DSOs have already in place something in their control room. We are not saying just change and run fully on our solution, but we want to seamlessly integrate in the existing infrastructure.
In this demo, we will show the Rwth cloud solution for substation automation, which is developed within the Sonio project. Our open source solution focuses on experimentation and validation of grid services for monitoring and control. One of the main features is the possibility to couple the cloud solution with a real-time grid simulator. This allows the testing of grid services already in an early stage of the development process without endangering the physical grid. In this demo, we consider the operation of a state estimation service which is based on a weighted least square approach. The state estimation service aims at determining the most probable grid state according to measurements which are obtained from the data gateway. The challenge of state estimation on distribution level is that only very few nodes are equipped with a measurement device. To address this problem, we can include nominal and pseudo measurements, which however involve a high measurement uncertainty. In a first scenario, we run the state estimation service within our cloud solution, assuming that, along with a set of pseudo measurements, only one phasor measurement unit is installed in the grid. With the customizable web interface, for visualization purposes, we can monitor the current state of the grid and observe the estimated voltages at each node. Rather large variations of the estimated values occur due to the low number of measurement devices. Therefore, in a second scenario, we include 4 additional phasor measurement units in the grid. The web interface allows the analysis of indicators describing the service performance, such as the average estimation error of the node voltages. Like this, we are able to notice an improved accuracy of the state estimation when adding further measurement units in the grid. To conclude, the Rwth solution provides an open source cloud architecture for substation automation, which enables the testing and analysis of monitoring and control services for distribution grids.
The concept is not just theoretical or a small laboratory idea, but is demonstrated in 3 large pilots in Germany, Greece, and Italy. Thanks to the 3 different pilots, all the components of the platform are under test and the architecture is fully validated. So that from the real experience, we also have the possibility to learn. And within the project, we have 2 iterations of release of the platform that will allow us at the end to have something mature and ready, close to be ready to market. The open source solutions will be released as part of the Sonio project in the Linux Foundation Energy, which also means that the plans for exploitation are very simple, which means we need to build synergies among the distribution system operators to go for standardized solutions that are widely applicable.
We could say a lot of words on that, but probably the answer is all in the motto of the Platone Italian demonstrator: cutting barriers, unlocking flexibility.
So Antonello was very epic. Thank you very much for putting together this. And let's really hope that the wish expressed in this video of sharing among the DSOs become reality beyond what has already been done. And thank you very much for being there. And Antonello, thank you for the activity that you and your university continue pouring into the growth of the technological awareness of TSOs and DSOs alike, and for your staying on our side on many of our projects. Now, I would like to ask Jose Ferrari Careto, CEO of Rwth, Vice Chair of E.DSO, but also Chairman of the Technology and Knowledge Sharing Committee of E.DSO, to take the floor and conclude this webinar. Please, Jose, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roberto. Good morning, dear participants, dear colleagues. It's a pleasure to wrap up the session and close a very participative and fruitful discussion on a topic that is really important to the digitalization of networks, a central process to the future of DSOs, particularly in Europe. I'd like to share with you a few ideas that I had the opportunity to collect during this exchange and that I believe deserve to be stressed once again. And I'll make it around 4 topics. The first one is that the current state shows that open source is here to stay. Open source is a concept established several decades ago, in late 90s, but is now very well known. It applies to more than 70% of current software solutions. It originates from the IT sector, where, according to a recent report by Synopsys, more than 70% of any modern software solution is made up of open source software, and 98% of applications use open source components. Some resource critical industries are already integrating open source on a large scale, and the financial sector and the telecommunication sector are very good examples of this. So this is the first topic I'd like to mention. The second one is that open source is an integral part of the European strategy. So it fits in the European strategy. Open source has a significant potential in the development of the European economy. Estimates of 65B to 95B euros, according to a recent study published by the European Commission. And we know that is stated that if open source contribution increases by 10% in the EU, this will generate an additional 0.4% to 0.6% to the European Union GDP. So we know also that the economic value of open source software in the European Union is equivalent to both air and water transport combined. So this is an important area in terms of financial and economics dimension to the European Union. And we know also that open source is a key element in Europe's digital strategy, which is clearly stated in the open source software strategy for 2020-2023. Open source, the open source software strategy in that document is recognize the important role that open source can play in achieving the goals of its digital strategy, of EU digital strategy. And we know also that the Commission leverages the transformative, innovative, and collaborative power of open source, encouraging the sharing and reuse of software solutions, knowledge, and expertise to deliver better European services that enrich society and focus on lowering costs to that society. On same chapter, the forthcoming Digitalization of Energy Action Plan, to be released this month, is expected to promote the use of open source solutions as well. So in this second topic, we recognize that open source is an integral part of the European strategy. The third block is to state that open source brings a set of benefits that are favorable to its adoption if the right conditions are met. And regarding these right conditions, it's important to highlight that, as stated in the guiding principles of the Linux Foundation for Energy, that it should be interoperable by default, resilient, secure, and safety by design, and should also simplify the design itself, which is very important when projects using open source are developed. We know that we run and we manage critical infrastructures. We know that safety nowadays and mainly cyber security are very important, and this should be incorporated by design. We know also that besides promoting the European software industry, it should also reduce implementation costs, opening markets and lowering the barriers to participation. And we believe that this is important cost-wise, but also in the fact, and to be honest, this for me, it's one of the most important components of open source, is that it opens the doors to very good collaboration, to crowdsourcing, and to put around some initiatives, a lot of very innovative people, a lot of very innovative collaboration that fosters somehow innovation. And I think that this is particularly important when we are discussing the aspects of open source implementation. The fourth topic is just to mention that in the energy sector, notably in the electricity distribution, open source is beginning to show clear signs through concrete examples of application, such as the projects and use cases shared during this morning. And this is a real sign that the industry, the E.DSOs are embracing open source, and this is already a reality. And I believe that events like this are very important to share what is going on regarding open source in Europe, what other DSOs are doing, because we don't need to invent the wheel when others are doing are implementing very good projects that we can adopt in our own realities. So, and I believe that the role of E.DSO is also to foster that sharing, that discussion, and to have very good use cases to inspire and to allow other DSOs to implement open source initiatives as well. We know that also that on vendor side, there are important vendors that are using open source as a base for their offers. We had here GE, that was a very relevant case, and we believe that this also will foster the adoption of open source. Finally, in this block, I would like to mention the fact that the European Commission has been making a very high effort to push for digitalization, data sharing, interoperability, and open source, supported by the initiatives presented this morning, such as the already mentioned European Data Strategy, Gaia-X, CSA Open DEI, and the forthcoming digitalization of Energy Action Plan. So a lot of challenges for DSOs, a lot of challenges to use IT with a greater intensity in our operations, and of course that open source will have an important role to play in this context we are living right now. Some final remarks on top of those 4 topics. First, to say that this morning's discussion has shown that DSOs and industry are making good progress and driving the acceleration of the transition to digital and smart energy grids in a cost-efficient way, namely by making use of best practices in software development and promoting innovative solutions through collaborative processes. Second, to say that as an industry that operates critical systems, in particular OT1s, OT systems, and that needs to accelerate towards the energy transition, it is important not to discriminate between proprietary or open source solutions, but rather to meet software characteristics, security, and comply with requirements and SLAs, whilst, as mentioned by Rwth, cutting costs, minimizing the risks, and preventing vendor lock-in. So this should be the way forward, and we need to consider different options that are on the table, and of course that open source is one of that options. Third, to say that it's also relevant to consider the limited number of options for expert development and technology sourcing that might lead to short-term impacts and long-term structural constraints. One of the reasons the European Commission considers HR development as a key strategic topic for 2023. And I believe that this probably is one of the main challenges we have had together as a bloc in the European Union, but in each one of our countries, because HR nowadays and the experts in those areas, namely IT, open source, and others, are, in my opinion, one of the main bottlenecks we have in order to go further in the digitalization process, particularly in the networks and in all efforts we need to do in order to intensify the use of IT in our sector. Finally, system operators, industry, vendors, and all other stakeholders have shown their willingness and capacity and are fully embracing this great journey to find common scenarios for open source larger adoption. And I believe that E.DSO is here also to help on this kind of events, on putting people together and to make bridges between vendors, DSOs, experts, and all stakeholders involved in this. So this is part of the role of E.DSO, and it's with great pleasure that we promote this kind of events, hoping that they are fruitful and that they can contribute to a greater intensity of IT, bigger adoption of open source, and success on overcoming the different challenges we as a sector have ahead. Having said that, I'd like just to conclude, wishing you all a nice day and hoping to see you soon again in person. Back to you, Roberto.
Thank you very much, José, for your words and the deep knowledge that you have been sharing with your words. May I ask all the panelists and the keynotes to come on the screen for a final thank to the attendees. A recording and slides will be made available on the E.DSO website. It will be in a matter of hours. And once more, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for the messages that have been conveyed here. We, as E.DSO, are committed in making best use of that and coming back to you to disturb you, maybe for a personalized insight or whatever, whenever it is needed. Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Rolf. Thank you, Antonello, and thank you, Eric. You have been staying all here. Thank you, Giuseppe. You are still online, and Jean-Marc and Lucien. Really thank you for your participation. It has been very productive, and I think that a polished version will be also mainstreamed in the near future. Thank you. Let me conclude and wish everybody a nice lunch, at least in Central Europe, José, and for you in a couple of hours maybe. So bye-bye and till the next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.